Hello and welcome to Leading the Way, Women in Lay Leadership Roles. My name is Barbara Rieckhoff and I'm one of the Associate Deans in the College of Education at DePaul University.
I'm Katie Carden. I'm the principal at St. Matthias School, just finishing my third year here, but finishing my 9th year as a principal in the Archdiocese of Chicago.
Hi, I'm Mary Rose Guerin. I am the head of school at Forest Ridge School of the Sacred Heart in Bellevue, Washington. I'm finishing my 2nd year in this position here, but I spent 15 years at Josephinum Academy in Chicago, and the majority of my career there, probably 10 or 11 of those years, was in leadership.
My name is Peggy Rocketenitz. I am the principal at St. John Birchman School, an elementary school in Chicago, and I am just finishing my 13th year as the principal here. Prior to that, I was a high school English teacher in the Chicago public school system for 11 years.
Great, thanks to our panel for being with us today. So this morning's session, we'd like to do the following, or these are our objectives: to examine the historical perspective of women in lay leadership, to look at roles and responsibilities held by lay leaders, to review the current status of Catholic school leadership, consider implications for preparation, induction, and mentoring of school leaders, and finally, hear from our panel and learn from 3 very experienced Catholic women in lay leadership roles to gain their perspective and insights. So what roles have women played in the history of the Church? How have women's roles in the laity transitioned into leadership positions? And what conditions have supported or been barriers to the development of these roles? We hope to answer some of these questions. In terms of the historical perspective, women have had a variety of roles in the Church. Traditionally, caregivers, educationalists, missionaries. While they were generally excluded from Episcopal and certain Christian churches, they've certainly been influential in the life of the Church as contemporaries of Jesus, to saints, missionaries, abbesses, nuns, founders of religious institutes, monarchs, and martyrs. In the early Church, Christianity certainly put men in positions of authority in marriage, in society, and in government, and their eligibility to the priesthood. In its early centuries, though, the Church offered women an enhanced social status and quickly found a wide following among women. In most church denominations, women have been the majority of the church attendees since early in the Christian era and into the present. Here at DePaul, we have St. Louise de Marillac, who was a co-founder with Vincent de Paul of the Daughters of Charity. She began her work as a member of the laity and has had a leading role in the Ladies of Charity, an organization of wealthy women dedicated to assisting those suffering from poverty and disease. Thinking about fast forwarding to present day and women's role in the Church, it was in 1994 that Pope John Paul II indicated the Church really had no authority to ordain women. Following that, in 1996, the U.S. Bishops' Committee on Women and Society established 3 important goals about women and their role in the Church. One was for promoting an increased appreciation of women in church life, and the second goal focused on the appointment of women to church leadership positions. Let's hear a little bit about some of those factors in promoting women's leadership in current times.
I think women are critical at this time in the life of the Church. Women need to be a part of all decision making when it comes to supporting local parishes, local Catholic schools, local Catholic apostolates. We need women to be at the table to help make those decisions. I find that women oftentimes need to be trailblazers when it comes to being a part of the Church and having a leadership role, because it could be that a woman never was in that position before, or she didn't have a spot on the parish council, or she wasn't in that leadership role on the parish staff. And I do see that women oftentimes need to be encouraged and inspired to be able to pursue those paths, especially if they haven't been there before. And that's something at the Given Institute that we try to do, and it's part of our mission, is inspiring young women to go out and use their gifts and talents for the good of others and for the church. I really believe that the church has a variety of vocations that women can participate in. Obviously, Religious Sisters is a wonderful part of our faith and a part of leading in the church, but also lay women have an opportunity to make waves and to create great good for others. And sometimes that hasn't been as celebrated or as promoted as today we know it needs to be. And we know that lay men and women, but women especially, need to step up, and they need to be a part of the future of the church and the change that's needed. The Given Forum invites women ages 21 to 30 to come and be trained for 5 days at the event here at Catholic University. But we also have a network and a partnership with lay women and Religious Sisters who serve as mentors to the young women. Women have so much to offer for the church and for the world. We have a unique gift in our femininity of motherhood, whether that be spiritual or physical motherhood. So I do feel that the church needs to invest in women. They need to invest financial resources. They need to invest apostolates and lots of different opportunities for women to be trained in leadership, but also to just be encouraged in who they are and in their vocation, that they have everything that it takes to fulfill their potential and to fulfill their calling that God has given them because of the dignity of their femininity and those natural gifts that they have been given.
And it was a short time after the Given Institute prepared this video that Pope Francis in 2020 highlights the role of the laity in the church. Specifically, he outlines the request that women be given participation in areas of responsibility in the church, and he believes it is essential for women to have a more relevant presence.
A ninguno lo bautizaron cura u obispo. A todos nosotros nos bautizaron como laicos. Laicos y laicas son protagonistas de la Iglesia. Hoy es especialmente necesario ampliar los espacios con presencia relevante femenina en la Iglesia. Y con presencia laical se entiende, pero subrayando lo femenino, porque las mujeres suelen ser dejadas de lado. Hemos de promover la integración de las mujeres en los lugares donde se toman las decisiones importantes. Recemos para que en virtud del bautismo los fieles laicos y las mujeres en una manera especial participen más en instancias de responsabilidad en la Iglesia, sin caer en los clericalismos que anulan el carisma laical.
So in the words of the Pope, we have all been baptized as lay people. So considering that as a starting point, and the authority of Catholic women deserves voice and vote. So let's turn to some statistics about leadership roles today that women hold. So 1/3 of the top lay leadership role is held by a woman, and that's in Catholic roles. The top high-ranking jobs in almost all Catholic dioceses are chancellor, CFO, and school superintendent. So those in these roles report directly to the bishop and typically control large departments and have great influence. So Catholic women are clearly holding an increasing number of lay leadership roles, but far less than what is represented by all the Catholic women. So in terms of their role in Catholic schools, 97% of those that are responsible and leading Catholic schools are the laity. And of that 97%, 75% are women and 22% are men. So leading Catholic schools clearly is a significant role for women and lay leadership. So let's turn to some of the research on Catholic school leadership. for men and for women. So we find that leadership is highly influenced by cultural and spiritual capital that a principal brings to the school. So those gifts and talents that the principal brings to the leadership experience become really important. And they can be so influential in making and shaping that school, its mission, its vision. So the relationship between the principal and the parish priest, that emerged in many research studies as being challenging, depending on the context. So that relationship is an important one, and sometimes there's tension, and a lot of it depends on the setting or the context, but it was something that was worth noting. Leaders are called in a special way to make the church present and operative, and the Catholic leader is a living example. So much of the research talks about how the Catholic school leader is a role model, particularly in the last bullet point. The conduct of the Catholic school leader is much more important than the speech. So in other words, this is really important in shaping kids, is being a role model. So Catholic school leaders serve as a really important role model. So then when we really dial down to research that's about supporting women in leadership roles in Catholic schools, an interesting study done by Eklund of 6 parishes, they found really strong differences in the culture surrounding women's leadership, and that is those that were working in that context. So there were very distinct factors that characterized a progressive parish culture of women in leadership when compared to a traditional culture. So in progressive parishes, priests really encouraged women's leadership, and female leaders talked about their agency for change in the church, in the local parish. So that was part of ongoing conversations. So it's really important that we talk about and think about the role of women and women's role as agents of change in school leaders, because it's got a big influence in how much they can exhibit and influence change over their school environments. So in terms of conditions that foster or hamper leadership with women, so those on the left side, in support of leadership, encouraging leadership development and that as an ongoing process, identifying ways to promote and support female leaders. Shared decision making is really important. Collaborative culture and working together, and seeing leaders as real agents of change. Some of the traditional practices that some of that research identified, things that really stand in the way of female leaders moving forward and getting the recognition they should get. Top-down decision making, when it's just one person or a very limited few making decisions. The concept of expert versus newcomer mentality, so that there are just a few people who are the experts and have all the answers. Sometimes that's traditions drive that. This is the way we've always done it, the policies and procedures, that those can't be changed. Other things that stand in the way, resistance to change and new ideas, doing things a new way. And then leaders only being seen as authority figures. That's another area that really stands in the way of leadership development and women as leaders. So here's a nice graphic that takes a look at the principal as a change agent. And you can see the different types of leadership and the different areas of leadership and how complex the role of the Catholic school leader is. So it's starting with nurturing a Catholic character, sharing leadership, the school-parish relationships, and if it's not a local parish, it might be some kind of a network of schools in the relationship, and then formation of Catholic school leadership. So it's a very complex role, and we've seen a lot of work done on studying leadership and studying Catholic schools, but the idea of studying Catholic school leaders, and particularly women in those roles, it's really important that we continue to do research in those areas if we want to foster strong leaders and continue to grow that population. So we have the National Catholic Standards that were developed in 2018, and they are somewhat of a benchmark for what the expectations are for Catholic schools, how they operate. And it's Standard 6 that focuses specifically on what an excellent Catholic school has: a qualified leader empowered by the board to realize and implement the school's mission and vision. If you look at the bottom information, the leader has quite a bit of responsibility over personnel, recruitment, professional growth, faith formation, and assessment. So there are quite a few responsibilities, and that previous graph in terms of the role of the Catholic school leader is really very, very immense. So thinking about those who might be called to lead, these are some reflective questions. Someone that is thinking about being a leader might want to use this as reflective questions. And just naming one or two of them, to ask yourself, do I look at my work in a Catholic school as a vocation, a call from God, or just a means of sustenance, just a job? Do I have special qualities of mind and heart? Do I have capacity, both intellectually and physically? So it's really important before embarking on a position in Catholic school leadership that we have people reflect on this role and its importance. Thinking about mentoring and preparing Catholic school leaders, we need to rely on strong partnerships. Our training has to involve hands-on experience, and we need to be able to give people experience in all areas of school leadership. Too often we just give them a little bit of a snippet of experience. Co-principalships and other ways of thinking about shared governance and shared configurations of leadership can be useful. And we need to support reflection as an ongoing part of the culture, and further discussion of this lay leadership role and how important it is working alongside those who are in the church. So at this time, what I'd like to do is turn it over to our panel, and we have a set of questions that we've developed to ask the panel to get their reflections on their own leadership, their careers in leadership, and their pathway. So I'm going to ask the questions and invite our panel to respond to them. So why don't we start with the first question? Can you share your pathway to leadership with us?
Sure, I'd be glad to begin. Again, Katie Carden, finishing my 9th year as a principal here in Chicago. My pathway to leadership was a little different. I started teaching in public school, and I always felt that there was something missing. So in addition to that, I worked in a religious ed program at my parish. And then I took several years off to raise 6 children. And my youngest was born with the diagnosis of Down syndrome. And at that time, I really had a plan to go and get my degree in special education. But seeing the many gifts that Ryan brought to our family, I realized, or at least I felt, that that was something missing in our Catholic schools. And my pathway to leadership really drove me into this path of how can we make our Catholic schools more inclusive, to be able to open our doors to all of children in God's community and build capacity within our teachers to differentiate and to make accommodations for kiddos that learned a little bit differently than we did. So I kind of built that program in my last school, and I came on to a new school because I do feel that this is my calling in life, and this is my passion, is to be able to share that love of inclusion and that importance of inclusion in Catholic schools. So here I am at my second school doing that work.
Thanks, Katie.
I think I'm next. So as I mentioned, and my sort of trajectory is similar to Katie's, although the kind of the foundation behind it is a little bit different. But I also was in the public school system teaching high school for 11 years, and was a member of our local parish, and had gotten to know the pastor. And through that relationship, there was a vacancy for the principalship, and he asked me if I would be interested in it. I hadn't considered prior to that, but also, as Katie mentioned, I did feel like there was something missing in kind of what I was doing. It was teaching for me at that time, and I was also the department chair at my high school, was more of a job than a vocation. And so I think that I was looking for a little bit more. And so I started my job here without any without my Type 75, and which was kind of a unique experience for me. Valuable, but unique. But I went through the process of getting my Type 75 as I was the principal. So I started in, July of whatever that year was, hired as the principal, and also started my Type 75 that same year, which was a really great way to kind of go through those courses, actually doing the work. And as I said, I've been here for next year will be the start of my 14th year.
And I have an interesting pathway as well. Although I did not start in public schools, I started my teaching career at Josephinum Academy, which is a high school in Chicago. It's an all-girls high school. And I was teaching for about 4 or 5 years. And throughout that time, I was also involved in a team setting on a curriculum team. So we were charged with trying to strengthen and align our curriculum in the school. And there was 4 or 5 teachers on this team with the director of curriculum and instruction at the time. And there was an opportunity after my 5th year of teaching for me to step into the assistant principal role to really lead the curriculum development. And I stepped into that role, and I too did not have a leadership degree or certification at that point. And so I pursued both a leadership degree and certification over the course of the next few years. I served in that role for about 8 years, and I really became in love with the development of curriculum in schools because I could see how that work really would lead to some great change. Then I served as principal for a few years at Josephinum. And then during that time, I realized that my love for curriculum was there, but I actually was more in love with setting a vision and strategy for kind of organizational change. And so I was presented with the opportunity to take the job of head of school here at Forest Ridge, which is a Sacred Heart school as well. And that's how I find myself here.
Wonderful. You all have great pathways to leadership, and it's amazing how much of your learning happened on the job. For all of you, it seems really consistent that you learned on the job. You brought so much to the roles, but you really learned on the job quite a bit. So we'll go on to the next question. What are the blessings and benefits you've experienced as a female lay leader in Catholic education? And I'll ask that to anybody on our panel.
I can go ahead and start. I think the biggest blessing is really to share and witness your faith. Every day, it's clear to me that the Holy Spirit is working through me, whether I'm helping a parent figure out how to pay tuition, how to solve a problem with their child, whether I'm working with a teacher after school, whether a child gets sent into me from recess, it's very clear to me the importance of my role and the work that I'm doing really truly feels like God's work. Sometimes on those hard days, you have to think about it a little bit more or pray a little bit more at night, but just really the ability to me is a blessing to touch the lives of students, teachers, and parents. It's a tremendous responsibility, but it also feels like a tremendous gift.
I would just add too, I think for specifically to Catholic education, one of the great blessings in leadership is the autonomy that Catholic leaders are given, which can be a blessing and a curse, actually. But for the most part, can be a blessing. So, Katie mentioned that, inclusion and inclusive practices are extremely important in her world. And she can create a school on that, without a lot of red tape, without all the red tape that you might get at a public school, like you have to do it this way, funds have to come from here, because we're tuition based, and because a lot of the funds that we raise, we can kind of do what we want with. So I think that has been a real benefit as a lay leader in a Catholic school, is being able to have a vision based on the needs of your local community, or based on what you believe, is important to Catholic education, and kind of execute that mission without a lot of roadblocks in the way.
Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I love being able to be a mission-driven leader. There's a real sense of purpose in our work, which makes it easier to come back to this work day after day. And there's kind of guidelines and parameters that help define decision-making and help us really kind of craft our vision for success. But again, there's still a level of freedom and creativity that we're giving as leaders to do the work that we know is best for our community.
What about challenges and roadblocks you've experienced as female lay leaders?
I can jump in on this one right away because I actually, for the most part, I don't know if it's because I grew up with 4 brothers or I generally ignore all of that and I don't see it. And somebody was like, "Didn't you see that happen?" And I was like, "I don't know. I didn't see anything." But in a recent meeting that I was in with some archdiocesan priests and our school, and just some males in leadership roles. There was a question posed. I think actually I was the only woman in the meeting. It was a Zoom meeting, obviously. And there was a question posed about the school in relationship to what's happening in our parish. And the response came from one of the males in the group that, "Oh, the pastors will figure it out." And I was like, "Hey, like I'm here and I've been here for 13 years and I'm the principal of the school. So I feel like I can figure it out." It was the first time it had been very clear to me that the buck stopped at the patriarch, right? So it was, and again, I think it was more just like a canned response to the question, not necessarily like taking me out of the equation, but the fact that came across that way, I was like, oh my gosh. So I think there is a bit of that still in our system and obviously in our church that you kind of just have to say, you just kind of have to push past, right? And say, you know what, no, I'm actually in charge of the school, so.
Anybody else on this question? Challenges and roadblocks?
I feel like I've been really lucky because I have spent the majority of my career in Sacred Heart schools that are governed by an order of the Religious of the Sacred Heart. So women are the top leadership in our organization. But I think when we think about what it means to be a woman who leads, we have to think about kind of the intersectionality of our identities. So it might look different for people depending on different parts of who they are. For me, I stepped into leadership very young, and so I have always felt this sense of a need to prove the quality of my work maybe a little bit more than other people might, so that people can see the credibility of the work that I do, because I don't know that that's always what they see when they first see me. And so I have had to work maybe double hard in those areas to make sure that people who don't know me well understand that I know what I'm doing and I do have experience, and that I can do the work that my older male counterparts can do as well. I will also say one of the unique challenges I find is that Catholic schools tend to not be as resourced as some other places. We are not, we don't have large staffs. We do a lot of hands-on work as leaders in our communities, and that's great and can be challenging in terms of your time. So I think as women, we tend to be caretakers and givers, and we can continue to give and give and give of ourselves. And so we have to figure out a way to kind of create the checks and balances so that there's pieces of us to give to our families, our spouses, our children, and those outside of our careers.
So well said, Mary Rose. I would like to tag on a little bit to how Peggy started us off originally. With some of the restructuring going on in the Archdiocese of Chicago, our church was recently closed. We went through the Renew My Church process, and the big question that came to me all the time was, well, how can we still be a Catholic school if the structure of a parish, meaning a church and a school, is changed? And I think that's a real challenge, because as we see that more, we are making our school is identifiably Catholic. It always was. So that one component of going to a weekly mass might look different, but we're going to find a way to do that at another church or in our gym. So that's only really one part of who we are. And, to Peggy's point, I was like, hello, we've been a Catholic school and we've been doing it. We're going to continue to do what we do. But I do see that as a challenge with some of our schools as they continue to change the structure a little bit of our parishes.
Thank you. So the idea of really pushing back, making sure that your voice is heard. So the women should have voice and vote in leadership positions really rings true. So moving on, what would you change if you could about your current either structures or your own ability to lead in your current setting?
I can start there, and it's more about not necessarily about the structures for me for leadership, but what I can do to empower women in my communities to be able to give them themselves fully to their work and home. I think that I've started, I work in girls' schools, and we spend a lot of time thinking about how we develop our students to become empowered women. And I've started to think a little bit about how we can start to create situations within our community that tell the external community about our girl-centric nature in a different way. And so I've been thinking a lot about things like paid maternity leave. I've been thinking about things like feeding stations for women on campus. I've been thinking a little bit about flexible work schedules so that both moms and dads, might be able to leave during a part of a day to go to something for their family and then come back. And so I'm trying to think about how do we create environments within our own community for the adults here that mimic what we're trying to do for our students, because the truth is they're going to go into a world where some of these things don't exist in their workplaces. And so how are we kind of putting our money where our mouth is for our adult community as well? And so that's something I'd love to change right now.
I would 100% echo those thoughts, Mary Rose. Like in a church, capital C church, that values family and values life, we have not, as a Catholic school system, done a great job with that. To give you a context on that, when my son was born 8 years ago, we didn't have paid maternity leave. So, I mean, the fact that, our teachers had to take, or me, had to take just sick days for our leave is really kind of shocking. So I think if we're going to, and, I go back to Barb's slide about the percentage of leaders in Catholic schools who are women is so high. I mean, that certainly, it may even be higher in terms of our teaching staff, right? And so if that is the case, we should be considering all of those things: feeding stations, maternity leave, flexible work schedules. Like, how we're not is really, I think, shame on us, right? So
Completely agree.
So we'll keep going. In what areas, we're thinking about preparation and thinking about new leaders and how you were prepared to serve as a lay leader. And were there areas that you felt well prepared, and were there other areas that you didn't feel you were as well prepared when you entered into your lay leadership roles?
I think in terms of the academics, having been an educator and the faith formation, I think those were areas where I felt really prepared. But coming into school that maybe didn't have so many resources, had a small staff due to budget constraints, figuring out a school budget and figuring out, I've got to, set tuition, and I've got to help make this affordable to parents. And then I have to market the school, I've got to go out there and market it. I think those were definitely different challenges, especially from somebody who taught prior in a public school, that were new to me. I had the luxury of having a mentor my first year, which was a huge help to me, because the role of a leader, a woman leader in our schools, can be lonely. It's only you. It's just you, the principal. And to be able to have somebody else to share successes and sorrows with and to bounce ideas off of was hugely helpful. So I'm a big, big proponent of mentorship programs.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, Rose.
I was going to say, I agree with that. I think the natural places where I felt best were in my leadership around classroom instruction and curriculum development. I think two areas, and I actually also felt prepared through my classes enough to engage in the conversations about finance and buildings and grounds and some of the things that scared me prior to taking those courses. The areas that I think continue to even today be a struggle for me are the delicate balance between management and leadership and how we move people in a way that is best for students in our organization, and either move them to see our vision and get on that bus or move them to another place. Kind of how we do that. And then I think the other piece for me that has still been a challenge is figuring out how we assess the work that we do in a way that is meaningful and can help us determine our next steps. How are we actually knowing if the work we're doing is having the impact we're intending it to have?
So in terms of thinking about your male counterparts, do you think there have been different expectations placed on you and them, or have you ever experienced that? As long as our topic is about women and lay leadership, have there been different expectations? And you may or may not know if there have been any, but are there times? Peggy's example was a good one of how her voice in the room, but thinking about just male lay principals versus female lay principals. Any thoughts on that? Or there certainly are more women leading Catholic schools in our local settings here.
I don't know. I actually don't. It's a great question, and because I think that the number of is so skewed that I don't know that I have a reference for my actual male counterpart. You're right. The example that I give was kind of a more nuanced example, because not only were they males, but they were priests, right? And so there's like a double level of
Right.
different expectations there. So yeah, I'm not sure that I feel that difference. You know, if we go to a meeting where there are male principals and female principals all together, I don't know that I necessarily sense a different set of expectations, or if they, you know, yeah, I don't know that one.
And it may be that we don't know, right? We don't know what sometimes there's a situation that occurs, and they may get a different response or a different reaction or reply to their needs. So we might not know, but it would be interesting to find out and see how. And then you think of your own teaching staff, male and female, and how do you treat them differently, and are there differences in terms of expectations? Probably not, but it's just something that we all need to be really aware of. Okay, and our last question, what recommendations for new leaders as you think about this topic and your own career pathway of leadership and all you've done so far? Any recommendations as people are embarking on leadership careers?
Build a network of people with whom you can share experience, whether that is other principals who you can call up for support, or mentors that you can find in a variety of ways. Like, it's a lonely job, and you need to surround yourself with people who know how to do the work, who've experienced it, who can not only give you good advice, but who can just be in it with you, because they know what you're going through.
I would also say something that has just I've learned in the last few years that I wish I had begun with, but I mean, I think part of it is just learning it, is ground everything you do in empathy, because I think it's easy to come in as a leader and think that you have to be in charge, and think, which you do, and know that the buck stops with you. But there is a level, if you can lead with empathy, I think that things can end up going more smoothly, and it's a hard lesson, and it's a hard thing to do, but I think it's an important thing.
And I think that's the best thing that we model for our school communities, right? I think it's a huge factor in building our school culture, but it's the best thing we can model for our staff, our students, and our parents as well. And I would just add to that to really define your vision, know what your vision is, and just constantly keep working toward that vision and make sure that that vision, everything you do is kind of rooted back to that vision and your beliefs as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you to our panel. It's obvious that you all, your careers and your leadership, you are still passionate about the work that you do and the value you place on it, but the importance of your role as a leader along with all the other roles that you have in your lives, be it as parent, as spouse, community member. So it's a real testament to all of you. So thank you. Just in terms of contact information for our panelists, if you want to reach out to them, ask some more questions about their career path and how they came to be, or questions about the process, I know they'd be happy to hear from you. So thanks to folks who are listening to our presentation, and we look forward to hearing about your course, the coursework you're doing, and any ways we can support your efforts in the days ahead. Thank you all so much.